I want to talk to you today about the phenomenon of pet humanization, focusing in particular on dogs. Pet humanization being the trend of treating dogs or puppies like human children, and in effect forgetting that they're dogs, or perhaps we're dealing with people who don't understand what the true nature of a dog is, and so on, and they embark on human-like behaviours in relating to their pet out of a misguided understanding of perhaps how much the dog understands or what's the correct way to relate to the dog. And to be honest with you, trying to communicate the rights and wrongs of how to relate to a dog and not to humanise the dog and so on, it's something I've struggled with as a vet for 20, 30 years in terms of dealing with clients, in terms of helping clients understand how to train their dog, how to relate to their dog, how to put good behaviours in place, and trying to explain to them perhaps what the dangers of humanising the dog too much would be. Way back in 2019, I was at a conference in London when I was setting up Gym Dog and putting together the Gym Dog business concept. I went to a conference in the Stripe building in London called Pet Tech, which was about all the latest trends in veterinary and all the latest trends in the pet sector. And one speaker at that conference put up a slide, and he said he'd been at a conference in Silicon Valley, and he heard Jeff Bezos speak. And Jeff Bezos said in 2019 that the biggest single commercial opportunity in business today was the humanization of animals. And I thought about that, and I listened to that and so on. And first of all, to me, I didn't agree with it as a concept, the idea of encouraging humanization. And I thought focusing on that as a commercial opportunity was, to be honest, somewhat cynical. So I decided to turn it on its head. And when I began to set up Gym Dog and grew the Gym Dog business concept, our focus is on accentuating dogs' natural needs and natural behaviours, and setting up a service that discourages humanisation, and setting up a service that ensures that they get to live their natural lives, their best natural lives. So Gym Dog is a holistic concept focusing on giving animals what they need, giving dogs what they need in particular, namely exercise, socialisation and so on, and discouraging humanisation, and helping owners to understand what the dog's natural needs are, and providing this type of a natural country setting where we let dogs be dogs, and we help owners understand what the dog's natural needs are, and a team of qualified people who take a holistic approach and focus on behaviour and well-being and socialisation as part of the overall package of giving the dog a healthy, happy life. So the Gym Dog business is in the antithesis of a humanisation business. So what we do here is the antithesis of the opposite of commercialising humanisation, thankfully. The reason for talking about this today is because there's a great article in the Sunday Independent written by Jim Stevens, who's a dog behaviourist and advisor to the Irish Kennel Club, and it's helped to crystallise some of the important concepts. And what I'm going to say might be of more relevance, of more interest to new dog owners, new pet owners who need to understand more about their animals and how to relate to their animals and how to put good behaviours for their own dog in place. I know I'm preaching to the converted in that, being a vet in County Kildare, on the edges of Kildare town, most of my own clientele are country people who grew up with animals and innately understand how to relate to a dog and innately understand that a dog is a dog. But nevertheless, a lot of what Jim Stevens said in his piece in the Sunday Independent helps to reinforce the need to learn good and enforce good behaviours in your dog. So I'll read a bit of it out and then I'll discuss it further. So he says, dog lovers are treating their pets more like humans. A leading dog behaviour specialist has warned about the downsides of doing so. Irish dogs have been seen wearing clothes, being pushed around with buggies, or transported around in knapsacks similar to baby slings. Now, Dog TV and other canine apps are the latest trend to keep pets entertained and occupied while their owners are at work. However, dog behaviourist Jim Stevens says he's seeing the unintended negative consequences of pet owners elevating their dogs to human status in his centre in Dublin. One of my stock things, he says, to say to clients is, your dog sees you as a servant. It's demanding of you food, attention. It won't let you leave the house, won't let you sit in your favourite chair. And it's all because the owners are treating them as equals or as humans and not as a dog. And it causes problems in dogs, from wearing clothing and overheating, dyeing their hair and using other products which are harmful, causing allergic reactions, not to mention behavioural problems. If you're with your dog all the time, and then you suddenly change your routine and you have to go out, and the dog has never been taught to be on its own, then you get separation-related problems that can lead to vocalisation, barking during the day, making a nuisance of themselves, destructiveness, and that impacts the family and can impact neighbourhoods, causing noise control problems and oftentimes even the guards becoming involved. And it's because many owners see the dog as a member of the family, or worse, as a fashion accessory, and they don't understand the behavioural requirements of their pets, says Jim Stevens. He has observed a spike in behavioural problems since the pandemic. Well, I'd agree with that 100%. There was a huge rise in dog ownership, and those same dogs now can't cope after the pandemic and the lockdowns because people are going back to work and circumstances have changed and routines have changed in the house, and dogs are developing separation anxiety in greater numbers. A lot of problem COVID dogs ended up in shelters across Britain, Ireland and Europe, he says, and this is true. The dog shelters will tell you that, have told us that too. Recently there has been the ad, which are good if they're doggy daycare facilities, that highlight the need to work on the dog's natural needs for socialisation and exercise and so on. Dog hotels, dog grooming parlours and pet shops offering bespoke clothing and accessories for dogs. What's wrong with all this, of course, is then when we make direct parallels in these facilities and offer what we perceive as luxury in a human context, oftentimes the perceived luxury of the dog hotel or the grooming parlour could just be stressful and unhealthy and unwanted for the dog. Jim Stevens goes on to say, I came to Ireland in the 80s. The dog was often kept out the back and restricted where it could go. But 15 years ago, you'd hardly see a dog walker or a dog grooming parlour. But he says, recently I was amazed at all the owners pushing little dogs in buggies and carrying them in knapsacks. The trend towards fur babies, which is a term I hate. You'll never hear the term fur baby being used in our surgery, in Kildare Vet Surgery. You'll never hear the term pet parent being used. I personally think equating the relationship of a dog owner to its dog and calling them a pet parent and creating that type of an artificial veneer of a bond of a mother and child and equating that to a dog ownership context, I actually believe it's unhealthy for a number of reasons. First of all, because the life cycle of the dog is so much shorter. Secondly, when and if they do become ill, there's often far less we can do for them than the human doctor would be. And thirdly, treating them too much like a child creates behavioural problems and has negative, often unintended and unforeseen consequences. So I hate the term fur baby, and another term I hate is pet parent, and you'll never hear those terms used in our surgery, in our clinic. There are practices in Dublin that encourage humanisation, and their business model is around humanisation in the Jeff Bezos opportunistic style. We would never profess to that, though in our practices here, both in Gym Dog and in Groom Vets, it's a holistic focus on the dog's natural needs, and we see ourselves as a conduit or an interpreter or a go-between, helping owners understand what the dog's natural needs actually are. So Jim Stevens goes on to say that the trend towards fur babies means that lots of dog owners now view their relationship as a sort of parent doting on a child. He says the growing trend to fur babies and so on, there would be a concern that owners would substitute screen time for walks as most dogs of whatever age like to interact with their owners out walking. And he goes on to say that a lot of these dogs that are being treated as children, they view the owners as a servant and they view themselves as equals, and this causes problems. Just to further expand or extrapolate on the reasons why humanization of dogs can be harmful, I want to go back and talk about Cesar Millan, who first began to write about the dangers of pet humanization way back in 2005, 2006. And still to this day, he believes that the relationship between a dog and its owner must be more of an old-fashioned, not quite master-servant, but one of a simpler, more detached bond, and certainly not of the parent-child type bond. And Cesar Millan has gone on to say that dogs need rules, boundaries and limitations. They need exercise. They need discipline. That rewards and affection should follow after they've done a task. So the cycle, the pattern should be exercise, then discipline or training, then a reward, then affection. Don't give affection for no reason. Don't give a reward for no reason. The dogs need to be task focused. So that would be the Cesar Millan way. He goes on to say that dogs respond to calm, assertive leadership. They don't respond to emotional conversations. So it's all really very good, very practical stuff, very sensible stuff, because God knows dogs don't speak English. So conversations are confusing at best, and commands should be kept very simple. Calm, assertive leadership, and very binary. Good dog, and then a reward. And keep it very simple. Just a few simple words. Otherwise, as Jim Stevens has said, the dog will forget that he's a dog. If you treat him too much like a human child, the dog will think that you're his servant. Behavioural problems that Jim Stevens outlined in that article include inappropriate toileting, destructive behaviours, stereotypical behaviours such as excessive whining and scratching, digging, pulling furniture apart and so on, and even inappropriate aggression, where if you're out walking and the dog thinks he's the master, then the risk of territorial or guarding behaviour when you meet other people is greater. So all of these behavioural problems can ultimately lead to tragedy, can lead to bites, can lead to difficulties that are very difficult to deal with. And many times we end up, unfortunately, having to euthanize dogs that have developed destructive behaviours or aggressive behaviours or antisocial behaviours simply because of inappropriate training, inappropriate signals early on. People being too soft with them. People parenting the child instead of putting an assertive training and reward and incentive style dynamic in place. So there should be training, there should be incentive, there should be reward. It's got to be not quite servant master, but more of a task focused relationship, and certainly not the parent bond. So the three biggest dangers then of humanizing dogs in particular: first of all, the behavioral problems. Secondly, big issue we see now growing. There's a growing problem with obesity, and obesity is occurring because of inappropriate feeding, nutritional imbalances. Linked to that, we're seeing a lot of bad teeth. And then thirdly, on a broader level, the upsurge in humanization is leading to the breeding of the wrong sorts of dogs with breed defects, congenital defects and so on, because they're being bred to be cute, they're being bred to look a certain way, and maybe the bad behaviours or the bad health issues in the parents are being ignored, and these dogs are simply being bred to look a certain way. So we don't do our dogs any favours when we overly humanize them, and that is in terms of giving too much affection without ensuring that there's a good dynamic in place whereby the dog understands that they're a dog, and the dog understands that Life is about performing a good task, pleasing the master in a good way, behaving appropriately, and then there's a good incentive there for them to behave appropriately. They'll receive a good reward and get affection afterwards. And then that dog will be secure. So it's all about routine and regularity and discipline. And as Cesar Millan says, there should be a task, there should be discipline, there should be an incentive, and then there can be a reward. So the dangers of humanization, particularly bear that in mind if you are a new dog owner, particularly if you're a new dog owner who's unsure how to relate to your dog, how to train your dog, how unsure what your dog's natural needs are. If a dog is giving you a signal that they're agitated, they're whining, they're jumping up and down, it's understanding what they want can be the hard part. So get yourselves the right advice from your local vets and from your local dog trainers to help you understand what your dog's natural needs are when your dog is telling you they're hungry or they want to walk or they're bored. And which is it? Because believe me, it is possible to understand what the dog is asking of you. It's possible to understand what the dog's natural needs are. When you can do so in a way that simplifies it, breaks it down, understand that the dogs are creatures of habit, they're much simpler than we are. They have simpler needs. Oftentimes they don't need extra food, they don't need luxury, they just need more time and more attention, and more stimulation and more exercise and more stimulation. And the last thing that Cesar Millan said, which I'm going to say inspired the gym dog concept as the service based around exercise and socialization in a natural setting. Cesar Millan said that 15 minutes of exercise can fix most breed difficulties. After 15 minutes of exercise, 90% of dogs will be better behaved.